The Rhode Island Foundation, partnering with passionate Rhode Islanders to lead, transform, and inspire our state. Learn more at rhodeislandfoundation.org.
Welcome to another segment of In Another Opinion, a public information program where our discussions are focused on the communities of color in the state of Rhode Island. I'm your host, Peter Wells. My guests today are former president of the Providence School Board, Keith Oliveira, and currently Chief Operating Officer of Rhode Island Nurses Institute Middle College Charter School, and Stephanie Gonzalez, currently a member of the School Board of Trustees and is the Associate Director of Partnerships at Blackstone Valley Prep Mayoral Academy. Welcome.
Thank you for having us.
You know, there's been a lot of conversation recently about job development, job readiness, but the key to all of this is education. And quite frankly, you know, the theme today is, are public schools or charter schools better suited for children of minority communities today and going forward? So what's your opinion? We'll start with Stephanie, please.
Yeah, I think it's really easy to try to generalize the charter school and traditional public school debate to say that only one type of education is better for kids of color. Across the country, charters do not perform the same across the board. I think it's important to really be hyper-local and look at every single school for what they are. There are some excellent examples here in Rhode Island of schools that are really doing right by by all kids, specifically kids of color, and there are some others that aren't, and I think it's important to note that. The other thing is that charter schools, I mean, it's important to ensure that families have choice, and so what's good for one family may not be good for another. So I think it's a complicated question to just say that one specific school type is better for kids of color than another.
What say you, Keith?
Yeah, I think it's a matter of options, matter of having options for families. That's the most important thing. Whether or not a charter school is serving the educational needs of the child. It's not the model itself, but whether or not the model is working for each particular kid. I think that's what's most important. I think the charter versus district school debate is one of choice. It's one of having families having options and having ways in which we can develop models of education that are particular to student needs and that are flexible enough to be able to serve the needs of all kids in a very deliberate way. So I think that's the most important thing.
Well, President Trump apparently has nominated or appointed, and she has been confirmed as the new Secretary of Education, and I guess she pushes the whole concept of choice. What is the difference between a public and charter school, administratively, let's say?
Well, I've been involved with charter schools for some time now, and a quick definition for me is that they are independently run public schools. Independent in the fact that they are not part of a school district. Now, they are public schools in all other sense of the word term. They have to be compliant with state regulations. They have to be compliant with all the state laws having the governing public education. So they are public schools. They are publicly funded. They're just not part of a school district. They are independently run and managed and governed public schools.
Now, when you say publicly funded, I guess that raises a great deal of question and disdain for some people. I guess some of the conversation is that if there's a certain amount of dollars that are allocated to a child in public school, if that child goes to a charter school, that money is lost to the public school. Is that your understanding of how the funding works?
So in 2010, the General Assembly passed the fair funding formula, which essentially said that the money follows the child and that the money belongs to a child. And that per pupil allocation is made up of local dollars, so from the municipality, and state dollars, and that money should follow the child wherever that child goes. So if a student in Central Falls chooses to go to Blackstone Valley Prep Mayoral Academy, they get the total amount of that per pupil allocation. I think it's important to change the narrative about what it means to have the fair funding formula. I think it's a little unfair to say that districts lose money when a child chooses to go to another school of choice because that child's not there and that child's not being served in that district. And simply because that child chooses to go to another school, it doesn't mean that they are not, they're not deserving of their per pupil allocation because they live in communities, their families pay taxes, and I think that they're deserving of taking that money and allocating it wherever they go to school.
So the total dollar amount wouldn't change to the district through the funding level, or would it?
So here's how I approach it. It gets much more fundamental than that. In public education, the whole principle of public education is that all kids have a right to a free and appropriate public education.
Right.
Okay. How we afford that and how we provide for that for all kids is what we call the per pupil allocations. It's a per pupil entitlement. Okay. Now that entitlement, that is the per pupil dollar value of what it costs to educate a particular kid in a particular municipality. That entitlement to that education and the dollars belong to the kid, to the student. And where they decide to access that public education is they can choose a charter school, they can choose a district school, but the entitlement is theirs. So to suggest that that per pupil entitlement should be spent with a district, or is you're taking it away from the district, no, it was never the district's money in the first place. It was always the student's entitlement. And that student can take that entitlement, that dollar value, and the parent can decide to have that allocated to the school district, or they can allocate it to the public charter school. That is their choice, and that is the option that they should have.
What seems to me then is this is in the packaging. Why do we actually distinguish between public and charter if they're both public schools?
Because it's a different model. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go
because it's a different model. For years, the traditional model has been to have school districts, and over time, it was decided that districts weren't performing as well for many kids, and we need to design a new model of how we provide public education. And charter schools in the early 90s was a concept that came up, and so it's a new model, a new way of delivering public education apart from the industrial district model.
Okay, industrial district model. So how are the curriculums different?
So there's no mandate that comes from the state or the federal government as to how districts or charter or public charter schools design their curriculum. The only thing that exists is that curriculums must be designed to ensure that they are aligned with Common Core standards, which were adopted by Rhode Island in 2010. Outside of that, teachers, school leaders, in both public charter schools and traditional public schools have the freedom to really innovate around any program that they see fit to ensure that they're serving kids the best way. And I think that's where schools, principals, and even teachers have a lot of flexibility in how they best serve the needs of individual students. And for a school like Rhinai, I think that's the perfect example, right? The curriculum is really concentrated on nursing, right? A student goes to that school knowing that that is the track that they're excited about, that they want to really become immersed in. And that gives this public charter school the flexibility to do that.
Well, what about your school, at the Mayoral Academy?
So same thing. So so at BVP, we do something called culturally responsive teaching. So we ensure that we're building in our curriculum building in texts and programs that really speak to the cultural needs of the students that we serve. So those are things that aren't mandated by the state, they're not mandated by the federal government, those are things that we choose to innovate around.
So Mayoral Academy doesn't necessarily mean political or politics?
No, it's simply a model of a school of governance that includes the board chaired by one of the mayors of the sending districts. So Blackstone Valley Prep serves students from Cumberland, Lincoln, Pawtucket, and Central Falls. And currently, Mayor James Diosa is the chair of the board.
See, that's what I talked about. Packaging it's about packaging because the term, the name actually means something. Nursing versus mayoral, in this case, meaning the combination of communities. Okay. So let me ask you this. I think most parents, their biggest concern today is getting children into next level of education, higher education. Do colleges and universities treat the graduates from charter schools the same as they do as public schools?
Well, I think colleges and universities evaluate all students based upon merit. The merit of the student, merit of the applicant that's applying to the school. I don't think they treat charter school students any differently than public school kids in that respect. Colleges and universities, they do, in any evaluation of a student's entry, they do look at the quality of the school where the kid is coming from. But I don't think that that's a distinction between charter versus district. That's just a distinction of the quality of the school that's sending that high school student forward. In that respect, no, I don't think that colleges and universities evaluate charter school students any differently than they do traditional district schools. It's all about merit on the quality of the applicant, the student, and the school that they're coming from, be it charter school, private school, or district school.
Well, since you're at a charter school that's focused on nursing, what has been the success rate of students going into nursing? Do you have any idea?
We've had 3 graduating classes. Well, first of all, of our graduates, 80% of our kids go on higher education to study either nursing or some healthcare related field.
80%?
Majority of them go to study nursing. We have kids at URI, we have kids at Rhode Island College, we have kids at Salve, mostly in-state schools. We have not had any of our graduates graduate college yet because they're still matriculating in college. But we expect that they'll be graduating sometime within the next couple of years.
Stephanie, how about your school? Do you have any idea what the college rate is?
So in Central Falls, in 2009, only 48% of our students were graduating from high school. 48%. Lots of transformation has happened since then, and in the latest report from Rhode Island Kids Count, while graduation rates across the state have increased, and the average is about 85% for the state of Rhode Island, in Central Falls, the graduation rate is still 72%. So it's significantly lower than the average, but it's a big jump from that 48% in 2009. We have been much better about building a college-going culture. I would say that's one of the priorities that we've instilled, not only in student culture, but in teacher culture, making sure that our kids are being held to higher expectations about what comes after a high school graduation. That said, the tracking of enrollment in college and then completion is data that we've still yet to really done a good job of collecting. So I think there's work to do in terms of doing that. I think anecdotally, we have kids going everywhere. We have kids matriculating at Harvard. We have kids matriculating at MIT and Brown and Notre Dame. So those stories are real. And I think the more that we continue to build this college-going culture in our district, the more we're going to see those stories come up, because we know that our kids are college material.
So really, there are no numbers yet. I guess the school is still out on whether or not public schools are putting more kids into college than charter schools.
Well, I think you have to look at it school by school, what the data of each school, and then make those comparisons. I've not seen the data that suggests that charter schools are putting more kids into college as opposed to district schools. I think you have to look at the schools particularly and see what they're doing. I mean, we have not all charter schools are high schools. Many charter schools are elementary schools, and so you can evaluate an elementary school putting a kid into in a college track at that level. So you have to evaluate the high school charter schools versus district charter schools and make an evaluation. But I haven't seen any data that suggests either way whether one school is putting more kids in college than others.
So where does the pushback come from parents? Is it at the elementary school charter school level or the high school charter school level? Is there any difference or
Pushback?
In other words, there are a lot of parents who are concerned about district dollars going to charter schools. Is it at the elementary level or the high school level that most of the destination comes from?
I don't think that there's a grade level distinction. I think that folks who are philosophically opposed to charter schools, they're going to be philosophically opposed to charter schools in a district, elementary or a high school. I do believe that there is, we see a much greater demand for charter schools at the elementary level because parents, when they're trying to decide what is in the best interest of their kid, they want to get their kid, they want to have the best option for them at the earliest grade possible. And so when you look at enrollment applications for charter schools, you'll see double-digit applications versus seats available. And that's why most charter schools have lotteries to get in, because you have much more demand for those seats than you have seats available. And I think that demand is much greater at the elementary level than you would have in the upper grades.
How do the lotteries work at, let's say, your various schools? Are they the same?
Well, by law, all charter schools, if you have more applicants to a charter school than you have seats available, by law, admission into the school is by a blind lottery. And most charter schools, the charter schools, they have different ways of doing their lottery.
Right.
But the point is, you have to have a blind lottery that gives all kids the same chance to get into the school, and that's by law and regulation.
So is there anything specific that's done at the lottery process at your school?
Yeah, so one of the things, as I mentioned, we serve kids from 4 very different communities. 2 are more suburban, the other 2 are more urban. And it's because we're committed to creating this intentionally diverse environment for our kids, right? Having kids coming together, learning side by side across lines of difference. So we weight our lottery to ensure that we have, as much as possible, an equal representation from all 4 of those communities. What else do we weight on? And also we're committed to serving at least 50% of students who qualify for free and reduced lunch. That number is actually much higher, at about 63% right now. But again, it also contributes to the way our lottery functions.
Yeah. It's been written or stated that each child in Rhode Island, it's about $15,000 per student. That money follows that student. I don't know if that's good or a good number or not, but would you say that is a good number as it relates to your school?
Our average. Well, we draw kids from all over the state, and so the per pupil allocation differs from community to community. I would say the average is about $16,000.
How do you reconcile that? I mean, I know you're the chief finance officer or fiscal officer, right?
Chief operating officer.
How do you allocate different dollar amounts per student coming into the school?
Well, we receive the different allocations from both the district and the state, because the per pupil dollar amount that comes to the school for each kid.
Right.
Not only that differs from community to community. Barrington's per pupil allocation is different from Providence or Central Falls. The percentage of that allocation also differs, to where the state picks up a larger share of that per pupil dollar amount from less wealthy communities than more wealthy communities. And so what we do as schools, we receive all of that revenue, both from the state and the local communities where our kids come from, and we put that into our operating budget, and we run our curriculum, our programs based upon our operating budget that comes from revenue from all of those sources.
Does that sound familiar to you? Same, Stephanie?
Yes, same for us.
Well, I'm thinking, if we're talking about the minority community or community of color, historically that's been a lower income community in most states, at least for the state of Rhode Island. Mm-hmm. So therefore, it would follow that the state must put in more money per student going to a charter school if they happen to be a child of color. Would that be a correct statement?
So the way the per pupil allocation, going back to what Keith was describing in terms of how that sort of gets packaged together, that per pupil amount, there's also something called a student success factor. So for students who qualify for free and reduced lunch, there's a 40% additional allocation. 40% of the base education amount is actually added to that total per pupil to account for poverty, essentially. And so you'll see communities like Central Falls receiving per child a little bit of a boost because of that 40% student success factor. And so that doesn't change if you're in a district or if you're in a charter. A student who chooses to go to a charter also has that student success factor come with them.
I see.
The funding formula applies to all public
Yeah.
schools, charter school or district school. Also included in just more recently in the per pupil formula, there is additional money for English language learners, kids who English is not their primary language at home. There was additional money put into the funding formula per pupil allocations for students who are English language learners. That's just a way of another providing supplemental funding to provide for the needs of those kids that don't speak English as their primary language.
And that was something that was approved just for that first budget. So for fiscal year 2017, it's important that additional money for English language learners continues to be part of the governor's budget, because it's the way that communities like Providence, communities like Central Falls, Pawtucket, Woonsocket, and even some of the communities in our urban ring like East Providence and Cranston can better support students who are English language learners. But again, that doesn't vary by district or by charter.
So do we have special teachers that take care of the non-first language speakers? In other words, if the language is Spanish at home, or if the language is French or Creole, Portuguese?
Well, charter schools, all schools are expected to have the appropriate personnel to serve the needs of their student body. And so if you have a student body that has a large number of Spanish-speaking students and they're leading to learn English, then you would staff appropriately to be able to address the needs of your particular student body. It's all dependent, and I think that is where the flexibility with charter schools come to benefit, because we know who our student body is, we know who our students are, and we know what resources we need to have, both personnel-wise, support-wise, to serve our student bodies. And that's one of the benefits that we have at schools, that we can be much more intentional in how we serve our students.
So go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. And so sometimes it is difficult at the district level to ensure that you're able to, that you have the money to hire the right staff to best support those kids. One of the things that we've done in Central Falls is that we actually have dual language classrooms from kindergarten through 6th grade. And that's a way to ensure that our students who are coming in as English language learners are not just learning English, but that they're also able to preserve their home language, which for the majority of our students is Spanish, though we're seeing an increase in our Cape Verdean student population as well.
Well, I think Woonsocket has been, it's been suggested that Woonsocket was predominantly, or at one time was predominantly a French-speaking area, so I imagine we'd have that covered in Woonsocket. If we use Providence, it might be Portuguese, depending on those geographic areas. But if you have children coming in on a lottery basis, they could be coming from any community, so you have to be prepared for that. And you are.
Well,
Okay.
yeah, you have to be.
You're both in agreement with that.
Absolutely. You have to
Okay.
serve who your students are. And you have to design your programs and your resource allocation and your personnel around who your students actually are. Again, we have greater flexibility in doing that than a district school does, because districts, there are larger schools serving larger numbers of kids, and the resources have to be distributed in a different way.
Do you have union representation for your instructors
No,
at the charter schools?
On the charter school side, no. Our teachers are not
charter
unionized.
schools, in charter schools, the faculty are by law allowed to form a union if they so choose to. Most charter schools have not. In Rhode Island, I don't think any of the charter schools, except for those charter schools that were established as part of a school district. So there were a couple of schools in Providence, one in Cranston, that were what we call in-district charters. And so the teachers in those schools are part of the collective bargaining unit of those school districts. But all the other charter schools, no.
So that does give you some, not having a union representation gives you a bit more flexibility to negotiate with teachers on a one-to-one basis.
Well, you design your academic programs in a way that if you design a school and the culture of the school is to respect the value of your teachers and your faculty, and they have voice into how the school is run and managed, then there would be no need for them to collectively organize, because they're part of the school culture, they're part of how the school operates. And so to this point, charter school faculty have not sought fit to have to organize a union, because they feel that, in my view, that they have significant voice and value into their school cultures.
Well, that's good. That's good to hear. I know that there's always been tension between the administration and unions, and of course the actual collective body. Both of you are products of public school, am I correct?
Yes.
Yes, I am.
So what do you prefer better today? If your children today were going to school, would you prefer the district school or the charter school?
I want the best option that serves my kids' needs, whether it's a district school or a charter school. I want options. And so if there's a charter school that I know they have a particular program and a curricular design that speaks to who my child is, then I'm going to send them to that school. If there's a district school that operates similarly and then I feel comfortable with it, I'll send them there. I wouldn't make that distinction just solely on the model. I would make that distinction based solely on my kids' needs and what school best serves my kids' particular needs.
Stephanie, you feel the same way?
I feel the same way. I don't have kids of my own, but when I think about all of the families out there, particularly from communities like Central Falls and Providence, who want to make the very best decision for their kids before those kiddos turn five, and they're going to be in a system or in a school till they graduate for the most part. I think it's important to really afford those families choice. And for some families, that means the traditional public school, and for other families, that means the international charter school because of their dual language immersion program. For others, it means Rhinai. For others, it means Blackstone Valley Prep. And I don't feel like it's responsible of me to make that decision for other families. And so I hope that Rhode Island continues to support choice for families.
Well, listen, you know, this has been a very rich conversation, but we've run out of time. But I want to thank both of you, today's guests, and Keith and Stephanie, and also to you, the viewers, for tuning in to another segment of In Another Opinion. A special thanks to Rhode Island PBS for making this program possible. I'm your host, Peter Wells. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter at inanotheropinion@gmail.com. Have a good day.
The Rhode Island Foundation, partnering with passionate Rhode Islanders to lead, transform, and inspire our state. Learn more at rhodeislandfoundation.org.